Imagine boarding a roller coaster train, not knowing what lies ahead. You think it will be a short, fun ride, but oh, how wrong you are. An hour after you board it, you start to get really worried, but the operators promise the ride will start soon. A week later, still nothing has happened, and by now your phone has ran out of battery, so all communication with the outside world is lost. Winter comes and goes, and yet you still don't depart. Many seasons later, you see big flashes in the sky from some kind of war being fought by nations that didn't exist yet when you so innocently joined the queue. Thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years pass and you're still sat in the same place, not having moved an inch. Suddenly, it becomes unbearably hot and you realize that the sun has lived its life and is now exploding, obliterating everything in the solar system. Except for you. You are still stuck on the same ride, wondering if you will ever be free from your suffering. Welcome to the Universe Coaster. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This roller coaster, built in 2018, takes 12 years to complete. The next iteration of the longest coaster is almost 4 times as long, at 45 years, which later tripled to 135 years. Now, 3 years later, it is finally time for a new longest coaster. This one won't be 10 times as long, or 100, or 1000. No, even a ride that's 1 trillion times as long as the previous coaster is nothing compared to the actual ride time of the Universe Coaster. So how does it work and why is it so incredibly long? It all starts with the looping coaster, which functions as an incredibly long ride to have as the baseline. First, it simply goes forward until it reaches the minimum forward speed of about 1 km per hour, after which it has to travel the entire track at that speed until it reaches the middle. And this track is big. This is the largest possible map with a size of 254 by 254, and the looping coaster fills it up almost entirely. Traveling all this track already takes a fairly long time, but the fun has only just started. When it reaches the middle, after about 100 in-game years, it reaches the end of the track. Surely it will just crash here, right? Well, actually it doesn't. It comes to a stop and then starts to slowly reverse. Yes, this train is moving, even though it doesn't seem like it. About once every 4 seconds it advances 1 frame. When sped up 128 times it looks like this, which is still very slow. It now has to travel the entire track backwards at this minimum speed, which is a massive 32 times slower than the minimum forward speed, and 4 times slower than the regular minimum backward speed that we used previously. The reason it doesn't crash is because the ride is in reverse incline mode. In this mode, it reverses out of the station, is pulled up by a chain lift, and when it reaches the end of the track, instead of crashing, it is let go to complete the rest of the track. However, you don't actually need to build a chain lift when you use this mode. You can simply build a small incline, which the train will reverse onto before immediately going forwards again. The game isn't prepared to deal with this. It thinks the train is still reversing as it has never reached the end of the chain lift or the track when going backwards. Therefore, it cannot crash. Why, when reaching the end of the track, it goes backwards at a speed 4 times slower than the normal minimum backward speed is still a mystery though. 3,278 years, 5 months and 30.3 days after the ride departed, it finally returns to the station and is finished. Psych, this was just the first lap, out of a total of 7. This gives it a total ride time of more than 23,000 in-game years, or about 2.38 real life years. And that's just the beginning, the real fun begins now. The long looping coaster is synchronized with the orange wild mouse coaster, which in turn is synchronized with this yellow wild mouse coaster and so on down the chain. They're not synchronized in a normal way though. Take a look at this. It is a simplified version of the Universe Coaster setup. When the looping coaster departs, so does the orange wild mouse. Nothing weird about that. But then the wild mouse arrives at its second station, which is directly below its first station and also synchronized with the looping coaster. It will only leave this second station once the long coaster has come around again. Then it will go to its third station, after which it goes back to the first. So for the orange wild mouse coaster to complete its track one time, the looping coaster has to complete its track twice. If we now look at the yellow wild mouse, we can see the same setup, with the orange wild mouse functioning as the long coaster here. Therefore, in order for the yellow wild mouse to complete its track once, the orange wild mouse has to complete its track twice, and the looping coaster has to go around 4 times. The pink wild mouse coaster multiplies this by 2 again, so for every time the vertical drop coaster goes around once, the looping coaster has to do its thing 8 times. But why are the stations in this very specific setup instead of just next to each other like this? Well, in this setup, the 2 stations of the yellow wild mouse are also synchronized with each other, and that is a problem. Since there is only 1 car on every wild mouse coaster, there will never be a vehicle in all 3 stations at the same time, so they can never depart and the whole thing locks up. Weirdly enough, 2 stations will still synchronize if they are 1 unit apart in height, and this is the key. If you build 1 wild mouse station 1 unit below the looping coaster station and the other one 1 unit above it, they won't synchronize with each other as they are now 2 units apart in height. These are now 2 different sets of 2 synchronized stations, and as soon as one of them has a vehicle in both stations, they can go. The compact design with the stations right above each other makes the chaining really easy, which is why we're using this design. Credits to JJ on my Discord server for coming up with this setup and helping me out with a bunch of other things as well. Back to the Universe Coaster. In this setup we have a few more than just 3 wild mouse coasters. In total there are 253 of them, each of which doubles the amount of times the looping coaster has to do its 7 laps. Why 253? Because you can only build 255 rides in a park, and the 2 other ride slots are already taken up by the long coaster and the Universe Coaster. The ride time of the long coaster is 2.38 years, and to calculate how often the last wild mouse in the chain does a full lap of its track, we have to multiply this by 2 to the power 253. This is a ridiculous number, but we're not quite done yet, as the Universe Coaster itself also adds to the ride time. In the small example, the vertical drop coaster had 1 train that did 1 lap, but this one is a bit more complicated. The Universe Coaster is a twister coaster with 4 stations and a total of 32 block sections, which allows it to have the maximum of 31 trains. If we look at the stations, we can see that one of them has both an entrance and an exit, while the other 3 only have an unreachable entrance. Therefore, guests can only get on and off the ride at this station. The question now is, how many times does the last wild mouse coaster have to go around before a train that departs this station returns to the same station to finish the ride? Let's take a look at what happens with just the last wild mouse and the twister coaster in isolation. Right now a train departs the boarding station of the twister coaster and behind it the red train enters it. The wild mouse is now in the next station and there is a problem. Neither of the trains in the station of the twister coaster it synchronizes with can depart, as there is still a train in the next block section. The game is clever though, and if this is the case, then the other ride can still depart anyway to prevent everything from locking up. So the wild mouse goes through the other stations and arrives at the first station again, having completed 1 lap. Now the bottom station of the twister coaster can depart, since the block section in front of it has been freed up. Immediately after it, the train in the station behind it can also go, and after that the wild mouse completes its 2nd lap. When the wild mouse arrives at the first station once again, both twister stations next to it are locked up, so it continues to its 2nd station. Here the top station of the twister can go and the wild mouse goes around for the third time. When it finishes this lap, the red train can finally depart and the next train moves into the boarding station of the twister coaster. Every train on the twister coaster has moved forward one block section now, which took 3 laps of the wild mouse coaster. Since there are 31 trains, doing a complete cycle of the twister coaster will take 93 wild mouse laps. For 3 of these laps the train is just chilling in the boarding station, which doesn't count for the ride time, so the total ride time of the twister coaster is 90 times that of the last wild mouse. We can now finally calculate the total ride time of the universe coaster. It is 2.38 years times 2 to the power 253 times 90. This is equal to 3.104508 times 10 to the power 78 years. Or if you fully write it out, it's this number. 3 quinvigitillion, 104 quatuor vigintillion, 507 tresvigintillion, and so on. Humans cannot comprehend how long this is, but I will try to give you a sense of the absurdity of this ride time. This is a grain of sand. It contains about 50 quintillion atoms. I want you to take one of its atoms, put it to the side and wait 1 year. After the year is up, put another atom to the side and wait another year, and so on. By the time you have deconstructed just 1/10,000,000th of the grain of sand, the sun will explode, but I want you to keep going. After 50 quintillion years you will be done, and then I want you to pick up the next grain of sand and deconstruct that one as well. After that, pick up the third one and keep going until you have taken apart the entire planet Earth, which is roughly 10 nonillion times as large as the single grain of sand you started with. When this is finally done, we are still nowhere near the completion of the universe coaster, so let's start deconstructing other planets like Mars and Jupiter, and eventually even the Sun itself, which is about 300,000 times as large as the Earth. After that we move on to the rest of the Milky Way, which contains roughly 100 billion stars. So we started at counting the atoms of a single grain of sand, then we did the same to the Earth, and now we're deconstructing the entire galaxy, which is so massive that it takes light, which travels at 300 million meters every second, 100,000 years to cross it. We still need to go bigger though. The observable universe is roughly 90 billion light years across and contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. By the time you are done counting every atom of every star, planet and gas cloud in every galaxy in the entire observable universe, you will finally have completed the new longest roller coaster ever built. I hope this helps you understand how ridiculously long the universe coaster really is and why it blows all previous longest coasters out of the water. Now, I know that with OpenRCT2 you can easily make even longer rides because of different synchronization mechanics and higher limits, but I built this coaster to be fully compatible with RCT2 Vanilla and Classic. If you want to see it for yourself, you can find a download link in the description. If you want to have it work in OpenRCT2, you will need to use a custom built version, which you can also find in the description. This is because for a very long time there was a bug which causes reversing trains to eventually go forward again, and by the time that was fixed, the synchronization mechanics were changed. Discord user Worm was so kind to take a version with the old mechanics, fix the backwards bug and provide me with a custom version of OpenRCT2 where this ride works. If you want to see me build interesting parks live and also play other games, you can follow me on Twitch. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next video.